Jim Wicks, my old manager, saw Jack Johnson fight, and he told me there were a lot of similarities between Johnson and Muhammad Ali. Both were master boxers at long range, both were great psychologists in and out of the ring, and both had that uncanny ability to control a fight to the point where you felt they could finish it any time they wanted. He was a flashier dresser than Ali. Jim told me when Johnson was in London he wore a golden hat and crocodile shoes. Johnson was from Galveston in Texas, the deep south of America. He was born in 1878, only 15 years after slavery was abolished. And old habits die hard in those parts, and Johnson knew how tough life was if your skin wasn't white. Somehow, in his youth, he decided he wasn't going to play the social game. He spoke his mind and did what he wanted to do as his boxing success came in the early years of the 20th century, and that made him unpopular. Tommy Burns took the title on the road to cash in while he could. Johnson followed him all the way to Australia, and then Boxing Day in 1908, in a specially built wooden arena on the shores of Rushcutter Bay outside Sydney, his moment came. It wasn't really much of a contest. Burns kept plodding forward, and Jack would let him have free shots, even pointing to his ribs. "Here, Tommy, now, here." Little Burns was only 5'7" tall, and Johnson was more than 6 foot. But as he often did, Johnson took his time. By round 14, though, it was too one-sided. Burns had been knocked down, and the police ordered the fight to be stopped. Johnson did deals for his movies of his fights, and he knew very well that if the fights were short, the films wouldn't sell too well. Naturally, he allowed them to go a bit longer to entice the public to watch. In October 1909, he defended his title against Stanley Ketchel in Colma, near San Francisco. Ketchel was one of the great middleweight champions, but like Burns, he was too small to worry Johnson too much. Ketchel was knocked down, cut, had blood running from his nose, but Jack wouldn't go in and finish it. Then, in the 12th round, Ketchel landed a big looping right hand to the temple, and Johnson went down. The effect was startling. Jack got up, and as Ketchel rushed in to finish it, Johnson hit him with a clean right uppercut, then laid him out flat on his back with another right hand. Poor old Stanley was out cold. When they brought him to, his front teeth were missing. They found them embedded in Johnson's glove. Johnson's biggest fight was in Reno, Nevada on July the 4th, 1910. Half of America had arrived in town to see the old champion, James J. Jeffries, try to knock out Jack. Jeffries had retired as undefeated champion in 1905, and in 5 years had grown fat and content on his farm in California. But he was persuaded to get fit and fight Johnson. This eventually developed into what became known as the White Hope era. Round after round, old Jeffries plodded in. Amazingly, he chewed gum. If he'd have swallowed it, he could have choked. But by round 15, he had been punched to a standstill. Johnson knocked him down a couple of times, and Jeffries' corner rushed in to stop the fight. 2 years later, fireman Jim Flynn tried his luck in Las Vegas, New Mexico, but he couldn't land a decent punch on the champion. He took to butting him like a billy goat. In the 9th round, he did it once too often and was disqualified. By then, nobody really wanted to promote Johnson, and his antics out of the ring made him increasingly unpopular, and eventually he fled the country when he was prosecuted for taking a woman across a state line for immoral purposes. He went to Canada and then to Europe, where he defended his title in Paris. When World War I broke out, he went to South America. He lost his title when he was knocked out in the 26th round by Jess Willard in Cuba in 1915. But by then he had been champion for 6.5 years. Jack Johnson deserves his place among the boxing greats. I'm Henry Cooper, this is Boxing Classics, and this was the story of Jack Johnson.